Question from Craig Caulfield from Maroochy River.
Mr. Robinson, thank you. Page 29 of the annual report, you talk of the various sleeves, and you've got one sleeve, 35% for, that's the customer hurdle, relating a little bit to what my colleague Ms. Levickis was talking about, and you've got 65% for the TSR, which is total shareholder returns. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. A couple of questions here. One is, I would like to see a greater increase on the customer side. Naturally enough, you've seen from what we're talking about. I would rather see a 50%, and I think that would be in line with what APRA's been recommending. So I'm wondering, my first question is, why is it 35-65 if APRA is recommending 50-50? Is that just timing that hasn't come in yet, or am I off track with somewhere else?
No, it's a great question. It goes back to one of the other people that talked about the report from ISS. Some of these proxy advisors, unsurprisingly, the people who own the shares are driven by short-term rewards and therefore want a focus on short-term rewards. So they're driving the vast majority of those shareholders actually vote against or are encouraged to vote against reward structures that focus on anything but shareholder reward. We agree with you that things like Net Promoter Score and others that make sure that the minds of the executive are looking beyond 1 year, are looking to the sustainability and the success for all stakeholders of this business over a longer period of time are really important. And when we first introduced this measure, there was a lot of pushback from proxy advisors. We've stuck with it. We look at increasing it, but we think that to have too much just to one measure of Net Promoter Score is an overweighting. So we're working to try and find other measures that achieve the same goal as Net Promoter Score, i.e. encouraging executives to look into the future, but one other than Net Promoter Score, and we'll lift the weighting over time as we identify those measures.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, we're in lockstep in terms of having that allocation there, and it seems to me to any proxy firms or shareholders that are looking at just 100% on shareholder returns, it's quite short-sighted. We'd all be aware that you will lose market share as people move to other banks if that's the case. So thank you, we're on the right page. I just wanted to drill down a little bit more granular on the first sleeve, 35%, and you've touched on it there. I was frankly shocked to see 35%, and then I looked into the first sleeve and it says it's the Net Promoter Score. The Net Promoter Score is averages across lots of people. I'm sure I've dealt with Bendigo and I haven't been happy, and I haven't had a survey that says, well, I recommend. I'm sure Mr. Wild got up and, I'm not sure how it works out, but the people that are aggrieved, we don't seem to get these surveys. Either way, that's a very simplistic answer. So imagine someone's walked into a bank, made a deposit, walks out, gets a survey at home. They say, yes, I'm happy to recommend the bank strongly. They made their deposit of $80 and it worked. But someone else in the country that's dealt for 8 years and they've lost their third generation family farm says no. That's one tick and one cross. The gravity of the differences is not taken into account in Net Promoter Score. Now that's where the Commonwealth Bank did drill down somewhat, not enough, and Bendigo Bank needs to go here. And I think Marnie Baker was talking before of saying we'll take on extras, and you alluded yourself. You need to look at numbers of cases going to the customer advocate, number of cases going to AFCA, number of cases going to court, and not just the numbers of cases, but what are those results? What's the feedback? Is it that 100 cases goes to AFCA and 20 are resolved and 80 remain unresolved? So I would like that to be investigated on a much more granular basis. And you talk in the REM report about engaging with stakeholders. Well, we represent 15,000 members and followers, 14,000. We'd love to engage with you on those things.
Thank you for those comments, and we agree. That's why, as I said, we have an increased Net Promoter Score above 35%, because we don't think it's the solution. The only thing I would note is that the target for Net Promoter Score is 20 basis points above the average of the other banks. The average of the other group that we use, I think, is -3. So it's not just doing it well, it's doing it materially better than the other groups in the marketplace. So it is a slightly more nuanced measure, but I understand the point you're making, and as I said, we are looking for other measures that will ensure that people are looking forward and looking at all stakeholders.
I do get your target group being the other banks, but that's probably the worst target. I know it's relevant. Let me just refer to page 31 on your report, where the Net Promoter Score for the last 5 years has been plus 27, plus 28, plus 30, plus 28, plus 28. That's an automatic bonus handed out when you've got to be plus 20. There's no incentive to say, let's improve that.
Well, again, we do try and think through all of these things. So you've got to be finding measures that can be independently verified. There's a limited set that you can use to move away from total shareholder return. But the other observation, Marnie's LTIs are all 4 years. So that's great. I can feel really comfortable that I'm going to be getting a good Net Promoter Score for 1 year, for next year. But if Marnie doesn't keep making good decisions, in 4 years' time, that will have collapsed back to where the other banks are. And that's why having it attached to not an STI, not a short-term incentive, but having it to a long-term incentive is the right outcome. It causes her to be thinking about how do I maintain that lead, given it's so important to us as we compete to have that sort of advantage over the other banks. Because, as Robert has mentioned, they've got some structural advantages at the capital adequacy and other areas. So we have to maintain that advantage and that lead, and as I said, it's attached to the LTI because it's causing her to think about how to maintain it over a longer period of time.
Yeah, I agree with the principles, but I think the figures I put bear out that it's too easy. Thank you.